Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day you're watching this. Welcome to this video. So how this video started is really cool, and it should be an inspirational message to all of you watching to show that anything is possible. Now Eric, who is the guest star in here, this is a private conversation / interview between us. And I actually didn't intend to post it, but I learned so much from this. Like, Eric, thank you so much. The information, Eric, that you taught me, I feel like is like millions of dollars worth of value, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time. And thank you for also allowing me to post this to give other people that same value, because I think if people really can listen and learn, it can benefit them so much. And that's why I want to share it. Now, what we're going to talk about today is health. I was doing my own research, and I thought about Eric, who's one of my favorite speakers when it comes to public speaking. It has an amazing program called WildFit. I mean, the #1 diet program in the world. Almost 100% of the people on it never go back to the way they ate before. And he changes the way we see food, which is important because the modern food system has manipulated the way we see food. So it's almost like WildFit rewires that manipulation the food companies have. But we're gonna actually learn some really, really interesting points in here. And I've just been, since an interview, I've been like, wow, I never looked at things like that. So that's what this is. I really hope you guys enjoy this and take something of value from it. And go follow Eric if you don't already know him already. Most of you guys will probably come from knowing him. But if you don't already, his Instagram's below. Every Monday he does a live stream, which is really awesome. He has so many great things. His program's awesome. And once again, Eric, thank you so much. You are awesome. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video.
Let's go. So I have a couple of questions prepared. As a world, I feel like we've gotten so off track. So the biggest question is, how did we get there? I really want to focus on what you've experienced with the Bushmen. They're living like how our ancestors lived, I would assume.
Megan, so let me do two things. The first thing is, let me tell you where it went wrong and why it's really important to understand how far back it went wrong. We somehow think that what we're doing to the planet is recent. Then we don't understand what's really going on. We've been causing these problems to the planet for 2 million years. And I say that argument is important because it's the same thing with diet. In order to understand why we're wrong, we have to understand where we went wrong. And I'll tell you where I think we went wrong.
Yeah, please.
Is that 30 some odd thousand years ago, some early, hunter-gatherer nomads, which is the way humans lived at that stage, returned to a campsite that they had frequented in the past, because that's normal. You travel with the water and the animal, and you come back to familiar campsites. And they noticed that there were plants growing where they had been throwing refuse. And they're like, somewhere along the line, one of them spotted this pattern. And at that point, the idea that they could actually grow those plants was germinated. Excuse the pun. And here's where it goes wrong. Let's imagine it's you and me, and it's 30,000 years ago, and we suddenly go, oh, Megan, we can grow plants. This is amazing. We don't have to go looking for them anymore. Okay, but Megan, here's a list of 10 plants that we like to eat. 5 of them are really yummy and sweet, and these 5 are really bitter, and the only time we eat them is because we're starving. Which 5 should we grow?
Sweeter ones.
That's where it goes wrong.
Here, there's this, I don't know if you've read it, Salt, Sugar, Fat. You probably heard of it. But so this is really eye-opening. I mean, it's similar to Fast Food Nation too, but it's really mostly about the manipulation and how.
Right now, and that manipulation started ourselves by manipulating our own food supply. And then as we started farming food supply farming out to other people, as we started saying, okay, well, you specialize on pigs, and you specialize on cows, and you specialize on vegetables over here, we began to diverge our food away from its naturally selected state. And basically we started genetically modifying stuff and selecting for stuff based on our preference. And that was already damaging to us. We can already see in the dental and fossil records of early humans that you start to see 15, 20,000 years ago, cavities and bone disease and all that kind of stuff. So we know that it started going off, but that that wasn't so damaging as it is today, because now the rate of change is exponentially higher. Okay, before you and I would have chosen, let's farm the sweet stuff. Okay, fine. But now the manufacturer going, let's put sweet stuff in there and make it addictive.
And then it gets people hooked. What is your opinion on raw dairy products? How do you think they should be consumed?
Definitely think they should be consumed. Raw dairy products should be consumed by baby calves a lot.
But not by humans.
No. No, you're 18?
Mm-hmm.
Do you plan to have children?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you may know this already. You're very, very, you're very bright and inquisitive. So you might know this already, but when you produce milk for your baby, the first roughly 16 drops that you will produce are called colostrum, and they are very specifically for your brand new newborn baby at that moment, for what the baby needs in that moment. Then for the next week, you will produce a watery substance that is exactly what your baby needs that week of its development during that time, with the exact right makeups of fat and sugar and hormones, which are basically software instructions. And then you know what will happen in week 2? You'll change it again. And you'll change it again in week 3, and you'll change it again in week 4. And every single week that you're breastfeeding up until a point, you will be producing the ideal, perfect, exactly what that infant needed for its exact stage of development in that moment, because it is not simply about calories. It's about calories, it's about nutritional constituents, and it's about communication with the child's epigenetic expression. So my question is, what stage of the cow, what stage of the baby calf's growth do you want to drink that milk and take those software instructions into your body?
That's true. So it's giving us unnecessary hormones as well. And also
unnecessary hormones, unbelievably high levels of fat, proteins that we can't even process, and a sugar that we can't even break down properly.
There's so many people who are like, this one diet's the right way, this one. And really, it depends on the person. It's about experimenting. I did veganism for 9 months, like last year, and long-term, it didn't work for me. But I learned a lot from it, because, I couldn't actually break down the nutrients. And I learned that. And then I started doing more of a carnivore-based ketogenic style.
Mm-hmm.
And eating that way was just going off of how I felt, was the best that I felt. But then there's are you actually getting all the nutrients? There's a YouTuber, his name is, it's spelled SV3RIGE. He's very interesting. He eats completely like raw meat, raw dairy products. That's it. And he ferments his own food. And I remember watching, and my first thought was to judge him. That's weird. But I started thinking, maybe he's doing something right. It's very interesting.
I would put to you that when you're researching food, and you'll see lots of food science and that kind of stuff, right? So experiments and studies and whatever. So the one rule that I generally have is that if I read about something anecdotal, like that guy living that way, the first thing I do is I look at the conclusions drawn from the anecdotal experience or the study. And then I compare those conclusions against what we know to be true of our evolutionary past. And if there's a conflict, I question the anecdotal example or the study immediately. And my logic here is this, that if you suddenly got yourself a pet lion, in order to keep that lion as healthy as possible, you don't need to do a bunch of food study. You don't need to run a bunch of, you don't need to go to your chem lab and do a bunch of experimentation on nutrition. You don't need to do anything. All you need to do is watch the Big Cat Diaries and look how lions live. And then you can duplicate that for your lion. And that is a fundamental truth of organisms. Every organism on Earth evolved a specific set of nutritional requirements and specific food production capacities. In other words, they involve the right teeth to eat the food they eat, the right digestive system to eat the food they eat, and then dependencies upon those particular foods. And humans are no different. So there are no, like this idea that there's a different diet for every human. There's some truth to that, but it's not really true. And here's what I mean. You and I both need vitamin C. You and I both need vitamin D. You and I both need all 20 of the amino acids. You and I need all the same things because we're both sapiens. There's no change in that. There's no difference in that. There's not some people that are good at being vegan and there's some people that are good at meat eating. We're Homo sapiens, and all of us have the same nutritional requirements. There are some differences in metabolism, and I suspect that has to do with the different type of roles that, people took on. Men and women are different, for example. But what I'm really trying to say is that when you see something anecdotal like that, all I'd ask you to do is to look back at human history and go, does that violate or does that align with our evolution as a species? And if it violates it, then you look and go, all right, why does it violate it? And why might that work? So dairy products are a great example. Dairy products is a total violation. Humans encountered milk maybe for the first time 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, at least the first time we know in the archaeological record. So it's a very new thing in our genetic history. So then why does it work? Why is it so many of the keto people like it? Well, because the phenomenal amount of fat in the milk is triggering fat loss. So if you're on a weight loss program, yeah, milk can actually help. But what is the longer term repercussion of that? What are the other issues? And of course, there's all kinds of studies to demonstrate that long-term consumption of milk and dairy products contributes quite seriously to the odds of somebody developing ovarian or prostate cancer. So the long-term issue is different than the short-term hack.
So when it comes to how when we look at our ancestors pre 10,000 years before that, and what they were eating and the state their bodies were they in a state of ketosis?
I would argue that they were most of the time. Let me go back to something else you said that's very, very important. Yes, I have spent a great deal of time with the Hadza people. I've been visiting them now for 10 years. But let's not make the mistake of assuming that they live the way our ancestors lived, because they've had all kinds of other influences. We don't know. What we can safely assume, I believe, is that the way they live is so much closer to the way our ancestors lived than the way we live that we can infer some things. A really good example is that the version of Africa that they're living in now is very different than the version of Africa they've been living in 250,000 years ago. They do not currently kill elephants or rhinos because more recently the government has gone to them and said, you can't kill those animals anymore. And so their own hunting patterns have been dramatically affected. And I have found that, I have found those visits with them incredibly enlightening, not putting them on some kind of pedestal saying that they're somehow better than us. Not at all. It's more a matter of saying, if I wanted to keep a pet lion at home, I want to go look at wild lions, and they're as close as we have to wild humans. And here's what we know about them is that they move a lot. They have to. They don't have Uber Eats. You are a natural born citizen of the internet. Everybody born before about 1997 is what we would call an internet immigrant. I'm an internet immigrant. You're a born citizen of the internet, right? So you have no idea what it was like to live at a time when there was no like instant app food delivery and stuff like that. It's not part of your existence in the same way. Those guys live in another version where on a normal day to do 10 to 20 miles of walking through the most incredibly unforgiving terrain is normal for them. So then we have to go, well, how does it affect us not to do that? How does it affect us? Our bodies apparently were designed and optimized to be able to do that. So what happens when we don't do it? Well, here's one example. We don't have a pump for our lymphatic system. You know, we have a pump for our cardio. We have two pumps for our overall cardiovascular system. We have our heart to pump blood because it was urgent and important to do that. We have our diaphragm to pump air because it's urgent and important to do that. But we don't have a pump for lymphatic fluid because it's not urgent. It's only important. And our hunger and our thirst drove us to walk and move, which forced lymphatic flow around us. And so we never had to evolve a pump for it. So if we now make the decision to not move around like that, there's a consequence. Here's another one directly to your question about ketosis. The pancreas is the most phenomenal. I mean, honestly, it's the most phenomenal thing. It's like, it's just such a great, it's magical almost. When you are not eating sugar, your pancreas goes, oh, there's an absence of sugars in my diet right now, which is normal. And so your pancreas starts producing glucagon. And glucagon will trigger the metabolism of fat. It'll trigger your body to ultimately burn fat. That's ketosis. And our ancestors would have lived in a state where the normal baseline metabolism was like that. The normal baseline energy processing was, hey, you know, we're producing glucagon right now because there's not a lot of sugar around, we know this because sugar is rare in nature. In sub-Saharan Africa, you're living on the savannah. I mean, okay, the berries come out for a few weeks and then they're gone. Maybe every now and again you come across some honey, and then every now and again in the fall, you know, you're getting some root vegetables, which are not super high in sugar, but they're carbohydrate. So then what happens when you eat those things is your pancreas goes, oh, switch modes. And it stops producing glucagon and it produces insulin. And it's only ever meant to do that for these short bursts of carbohydrates, these short bursts. And if you start doing it for a long time, the body goes, oh, wait a minute now. There's a lot of sugar out here. Do you know what's coming next is winter? There's going to be a drought. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that sugar and we're going to try and store it. And the first thing we're going to do is store it in the blood. We're going to immediately put it in the blood. And we can store about 2,000, 2,500 calories of blood sugar. But then the sugar's full of blood. We're done. We can't put, or sorry, the blood is full of sugar. We can't put any more in. So then the body goes, where else can we put it? Liver. We can put it in the liver and we can hide it in the muscles. And it's called glycogen. And then once all the glycogen is full, then the body goes, what now? And it starts making fat. And you start storing fat. But here's where the problem is. To your question, were we in ketosis most of the time? Absolutely. But how people are living today, I think you only need to look around. Your stomach is about the size of your fist in normal mode. So that's how much you should be eating in a normal mode, right? Like your stomach is about that size, but your stomach is also another amazing organ. Like evolution is just so fascinating. Your stomach is incredibly flexible. And so if I'm the man of our tribe and I go kill us a mammoth, sorry, very sexist, but that's how it was.
Yeah.
And then I bring meat back to you. You're not going to just eat one little fist load of it because you're going, man, I might not get meat tomorrow. So you're going to eat and eat and eat to the point your stomach is distended and stretched, and your stomach can do that. But you know, Megan, you know what you're not going to do? Does anybody have a side of potatoes with this?
Yeah.
You're going to eat that one thing until your stomach is completely distended. And then you're going to process it and process it and process it. And your stomach's going to shrink back down to its normal size again because the stomach's meant to do that. Of course, the problem for many people is that they eat unbelievably convoluted and complex meals mixed with all kinds of different substances that make it difficult for them to digest. They end up with indigestion. Their stomach stays stretched for a long time. And now when their stomach feels a little empty, it takes way more food to fill their stomach than if it was just the size of their fist.
In one talk that you had given, I remember you had said that if you're not moving for 10 minutes, you'll get up and do something small just to actually be moving throughout the day. So is that something you still practice?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The only reason I didn't do it right before our little chat here, I was on a detailed meeting with my team, and my calendar is set this way. You know, you used a link to book with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That link is programmed that there's a gap between every meeting. There's a big gap. Like I have a gap. The meeting is finished. I go outside, I do some kettlebell swings, or I go for a walk on the beach, or I do some push-ups, or I just stretch. And I do that between each project and between each meeting because I know two very important things. I want more than two. I want my lymphatic fluid flowing, right? I want lymph flowing through my system. And the only way that works is when you contract and relax muscles. That pumps it along. Breathing deeply does it because same thing, you're moving your tissue. So I want that. I also want my muscles to stay. Listen, Megan, I don't know if you know this yet. You're not immortal. I know that at 18 you feel that way, but you're not. And you know, the good news for you is your body is incredibly resilient at this age. The truth is you could go and eat at McDonald's 3 days a week and you probably wouldn't put on a pound. Your body is super resilient. I'm 50. And you know what happens is that the body is suddenly not as good at healing as it was before and all that kind of stuff. So I know that if I don't use it, I'm going to lose it. So that's the other part of it is I want to make sure that my muscles are being used so that they're reminded that I love them and that I care about them and I still want them. And also, this is fascinating, is your bones strengthen based on their use. So the two things that I know of that stimulate bone density, there are other nutritional things, but behaviorally, one is impact. So when your body gets impact, like when you're running or that kind of stuff, or falling or whatever, your body goes, oh, I better make sure those bones are good and strong. And the other thing is that when you lift a really heavy weight, so let's say I've got a weight in my fist over here, and I lift that weight, this bone is being bent. And so is this one. The bone is taking the weight of it So are the muscles, but the bone is the real structure. It is that torquing of the bone that's going to keep it strong. I want to be strong into my 90s, so I get up and move. Oh, one other thing. You can find this yourself. Go Google it. Google brain scans of inactive people versus active people. Have somebody sit at their desk for 20 minutes and then do a brain scan on them. Luckily, other people have done this, so you don't have to do it. But you can see their brain. And you know what's crazy? It's like there's a blackout going on in there. There's just almost no cognitive function going on. It just goes dim. Get that same person to get up and dance or move around or move their body, and it's like a light show in there all of a sudden. And so if I want to be on for an interview, if I want to be on for creative writing, if I want to be on for project management, then I got to get my brain on, move the body.
Because for sure, we're not designed to be sitting down at a computer desk all day. And that can also lead to depression as well. The negativity bias too is really interesting to learn about, because you're in the jungle, you're an ancient human, and you see the tiger. You've got to notice that over the berries, or it's over for you. And that's why I think it's so important to understand, because it helps you understand why we're so inclined to focus on the negative. And another question that I had, it was about dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's a huge problem right now. And I would assume that it wasn't tens of thousands of years ago. And
it's a modern thing. I'm not saying that there wasn't some form of memory degradation and that kind of stuff in the future, but like we're seeing cancer, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, all of these things are just on the upswing, and they're on the upswing because of the way we live. I will share with you that one of my least favorite expressions is lifestyle disease. I hate the expression lifestyle disease, and hate's a tough word to use, but I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is that I feel very firmly that it's that it was created in order to shift the blame from the government and the food manufacturing industries onto the consumer for the damage that they're doing. So now when somebody gets overweight, we say that they have a lifestyle disease. If somebody gets type 2 diabetes or heart disease, they have a lifestyle disease. In other words, it's their own fault. And what I would say is it's not their fault. It is their responsibility to do something about it. But we live in a world where the food industry is manipulating regulation, it's lobbying, it's changing legislation, it's messing with education. And so we are suffering massive health degradation in our population. And they're not lifestyle diseases, they are food manufacturing and marketing diseases.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Also,
so now, what was your actual question? I don't think I actually answered it.
Oh, no, you did. It was.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was. It was about Alzheimer's, and I forgot the question. I better go get a check, right? But here's a little thought that I have for you about that. This is silly evolutionary theory, but it's really interesting is that the part of the brain that's attacked by Alzheimer's first, apparently, I'm no brain scientist. I've just been reading a little bit about this, of course, but the part of the brain that is attacked first often by Alzheimer's is the part of the brain that handles mapping and geographic awareness. And I think that's why you often hear stories about people with Alzheimer's getting lost. And then the other thing that we think we know is that when people eat phenomenal levels of sugar, their memory is blunted. In fact, most universities in the United States of America offer study guides to the students suggesting that they don't eat sugar during exam season while they're studying, because it's absolutely been shown that huge amounts of sugar blunt your memory. I actually wonder if that's not in a sense a way of kind of like protecting the population, protecting the young in the population against the old. In other words, when fruit comes into season, if the elderly people in the tribe go and eat all the fruit, there's none left over for the young, and then there would be a problem. And so I believe that it's possible that what kind of happened is that in cultures where sugar did blunt the memory a little, and it's like, I don't remember where all the fruit trees are, it created more availability. This is silly. Most of my evolutionary theories are much more solid than this one. I know this is silly, but here's the bigger thing. And this one is much more solid and real, and something I'd love for you, just you and me, just you, me personally talking about here. Your mobile device is an alternate brain. And let me put this another way. I saw this device the other day. It's a brace that you put on your knee, but it's battery powered. And what it means is that when you're squatting down, it power assists you to stand up so you don't put so much strain on your knee. What do you think that's going to do to the knees over time? It's going to weaken them. So how many phone numbers do you know?
Like memorized?
Yeah.
About, I'd say 6.
So if you know 6, you are exceptional for your age, because most people don't know 6 because their speed dial handles it for them, right? When I was your age, I probably knew 40 or 50 phone numbers. I mean, all of my friends, my mom's work, my dad's work, my mom's, like I knew them all because we had to know them all. And now all of a sudden we've acquiesced so much of our memory capacity to our brain. How about this? Do you use a GPS when you're driving?
I do.
In your hometown?
Well, I just moved to a new city, so in that sense, yes. But my hometown, no.
Okay, but many people are using them even in their hometowns. Why? Well, because they've got the traffic conditions on them. But in the meantime, it means that they're not actually having to think about where they are. And geographic awareness is one of the big functions of the brain, is keeping track of where you are. In fact, you can do some research and find this, but the cab drivers in London, they apparently have statistically the biggest brains in the world. And the reason for this is that to become a cab driver in the city of London, you have to study and get basically a degree. You study, I think it's for 4 years, and you learn something they call the knowledge. And the knowledge is every single street, pub, hotel, restaurant, and at least 2 ways to get between them all in case there's roadworks. You have to know everything about that city in order to get your taxi license. So what was really fascinating is they found that studying this stuff didn't cause their brains to grow, but recalling this stuff did. So when they first learned the information, it didn't cause a bunch of brain growth, but it was being a taxi driver and constantly going back to those memories and constantly thinking about their geographic awareness and keeping track of where they are, constantly sent blood flow to that part of the brain, which stimulated growth of that part of the brain, because the brain is just like a muscle. The more you use it, the bigger it gets, the stronger it gets, right? Mm-hmm. But now people are handing that job over to their GPSs. And so they're not getting the blood flow to the brain. And so if you think that dementia and Alzheimer's are scary today, wait till your generation ends up there. Because so many of your generation, even more than mine, and mine's bad, by the way, but even your generation's even more. It's like, I don't have to know stuff. My phone knows it for me.
Do you think that is intentional?
When you say intentional, that would mean that somebody or something or someone had an intention. Who would that be?
The more I was studying the Food Foundation, I came across Monsanto, yep, which was bought by Bayer and other corporations like Cargill, and they seem to all lead back to the same places. I don't want to jump into conspiracy or anything, but that is something that comes up, is you start to see the same people at the very top, and it all conveys into interdependence. So you take away, you make, people eat bad food, and in turn they're sick. And so now they have to take pills, which don't actually cure them, but it keeps them sick, and they're paying to be treated. And then,
okay, so I don't think that anybody is designing electronic devices in order to stimulate dementia, but I do believe that they're creating electronic devices with a very strict intention of making them addictive, to take away your sense of choice so that you can't put them down. And that the side effect of that is, one of the side effects of that is going to be dementia. So look, I don't know if it still does this, but I noticed for a long time when you open up Facebook on your app on your phone, that sometimes there'd be an image that would be there for a second, but then the app would reset and then the wall would refresh. And everybody thought that that was a glitch. And I would put to you, that's not a glitch at all. That is a perfectly designed hook for your subconscious, because Facebook knows you better than anybody, and it knows what kind of image is going to make you scroll to the bottom of the wall to find the image you lost. And so they are constantly trying to find ways to make their platforms more addictive, take over more of your jobs, not to damage you, but to simply make money.
Yeah.
And I would put to you that it's kind of the same with the tobacco industry. They weren't trying to give people cancer. They were simply hiding the fact that it could cause cancer because they wanted to make money. And so now we have the same thing going on in the food industry. I don't think anybody out there is saying, wow, we want to rot people's teeth out of their head and we want them to end up with type 2 diabetes and all that kind of stuff. We just want to make money. But Megan, don't for a minute think that conspiracy theories don't exist. I mean, or the conspiracies don't exist. Sure, there are some nut bar conspiracy theories out there, like 5G causing coronavirus. I mean, there's some nut bar theories out there, but there's something else, and that is conspiracies. And I'll give you a perfectly good example of one. And you may have heard me speak about this before, but it's mainstream media. This is not conspiracy theory. And that is that it became quite clear in the 1950s that sugar was stimulating heart disease, that there are some specific things that happen inside the body when you ingest too much sugar on a regular basis that causes cardiovascular disease. This started becoming a big issue in the 50s, and the sugar industry saw the damage it was going to do. And they commissioned a study. They paid 2 Harvard researchers to basically blame fat for heart disease. And those Harvard researchers managed to get their paper delivered into the New England Journal of Medicine without disclosing that the sugar industry paid for it, because that wasn't required at that stage. And so their paper blaming fat for heart disease was published in one of the journals, in New England Journal. And as a result of that, it became lore, and the entire low-fat movement was created from that. Now, in the meantime, not only was the low-fat movement created, which is dangerous in and of itself because fat is an incredibly important nutrient. There are bad fats, don't get me wrong, but low fat, like a lot of people were not getting enough fat because of this. And then the other side of it is that people needed to replace those calories. And matter of fact, I might have a direct quote for you if I can find it here. Let's see. This is a quote from, in 1954, the president of the Sugar Research Foundation. Okay, you'll find that lobbyists are always named something like that, the sugar. In fact, now they go even worse. Now they're called like the Health Research Foundation. They even take the name sugar or dairy or whatever out. But here's his quote. This is a guy named Henry Haas. He said, leading nutritionists are pointing out the chemical connection between high-fat diet and the formation of cholesterol, which partly plugs our arteries and capillaries, restricting our blood flow and causes high blood pressure and heart trouble. Okay, all of that is about sugar, but he's now referring to research he commissioned, you understand? Mm-hmm. That was a lie. He then said, if you put the middle-aged man on a low-fat diet, it takes just 5 days for the blood cholesterol to get down where it should be. If the carbohydrate industries were to recapture, as in we've lost it, right? We're to recapture this 20% of the calories in the US diet, the difference between the 40% which fat has and the 20% which it ought to have, and sugar maintained its current share of the carbohydrate, this change would mean an increase in the per capita consumption of sugar by more than 1/3, with a tremendous improvement in general health. So you understand, they commissioned a study. They then referred to their fake study to justify people not eating fat so that they could replace fat with sugar. By the way, in the 1970s, when I was born, there was almost nobody in America with type 2 diabetes under 40 years old. Now, 20 million young Americans have diabetes, 20 million. That's a conspiracy. So don't discount every conspiracy theory, because there's a great expression. Just because you're feeling paranoid doesn't mean they're not plotting against you.
That is true. And with the excess fat, you're like, what do they do with it? Well, the government was actually, that was one thing I was mentioning here, was actively promoting the dairy farmers to, use the GMO products to produce as much milk fat. And people weren't buying full fat milk because of this whole movement. They were buying non-fat. So what they did with all the extra fat was turn it into cheese. But still, the government was over buying cheese, and they found underground bunkers where they were storing the cheese. And it was $4 billion taxpayer dollars every year. I think it was.
What's really interesting about that too, part of that is actually a war throwback, because they were using powdered milk because it was one way to ship cheap calories to theater. And of course, when the war ended, in the meantime, they'd started subsidizing dairy farms. And so many farmers said, well, we're not going to grow that anymore. Government's paying us for milk, so we'll just do more milk. And so by the end of that, they had all these farmers that were making milk and no more demand. And so they started stimulating demand in the general population. Crazy stuff.
It is. It's the same with corn, wheat, soy, all of those. And I think it was Earl Butz who was the Secretary of Agriculture at the time. It was under the Nixon presidency, I think. And he was encouraging all the farmers, produce as much as you can. They were like, well, who's buying it? We're producing too much. And they said, oh, it's fine. We'll buy it all. But then most products, and I know at least in my house right now, I'm sure where you are traced in some way to corn, soy, wheat, and cotton. So
yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
It is. It really is. Well, continue with quotes as we wrap up. There's one that it always stuck with me. No, Edward Bernays, that was his name. He was interesting. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew. And he's the reason why the tobacco industry started targeting women. He worked with the big cigarette companies. He also founded PR. But he wrote a book in 1928 called Propaganda. Okay, so he opens with saying, in almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we're dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness the social forces, and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. And I thought it was really profound, but if you put the food industry into that context and replace they, in a way, they fit that.
The food industry, I mean, as manipulative and disgusting as the tobacco industry was, and have you gotten to the part where how they tricked women into smoking?
Yes, I think I just got past the Philip Morris and their new campaigns. I'm in the salt section.
They basically, I'm sure you've either got there or you won't, but at the time that was the big problem is women don't like dirty, and so they wouldn't smoke, but they tied it to the suffrage movement. They tied it to the vote. They tied it to women's lib. And suddenly, in order for you to feel like an independent woman, you had to have a cigarette. And boom, done. You know, he really was smart about that stuff. But here's the thing, as manipulative and evil as we might think the tobacco industry was, I would put to you that the food industry is worse. Yeah. They're worse because the tobacco industry was always only ever manipulating us to do something that was obviously bad for us. You know, like the first time you suck on a cigarette, you cough and gag. It's disgusting. It smells gross. Like it's clearly not necessary. The food industry is manipulating a core functional need of the body for their own profits. It's bad.
How do you recommend that people can live a better life today, implementing how we live most of our lives on a ketogenic diet where we are constantly moving? And in a way, we've been tricked because we tricked ourselves, like you said, 30,000 years ago or whenever, when we figured out that, we could actually regrow on plants. But how do you recommend we best re-trick ourselves in a way to reframe the way we think about food?
One way to kind of think of it is like, if your computer gets a virus, you got to go get an antivirus program. And in a very real sense, most people have food viruses. And I don't mean literally. I mean that they have a memory that ice cream makes me feel this, or cookies make me feel that, or, whatever. They've just got a lot of these things, or that Easter has to involve chocolate. Like, who bought and paid for that idea? And so there are people that, that have these ideas in their head that have been bought and paid for. And what I would suggest is that what we really need to do is we need to work on antiviral. We need to go in and change the psychology. So, anybody can go write some diet book. And by the way, as much as I support the general idea of keto doesn't mean healthy. Keto is a specific reaction of the body, and you can do dirty, bad, unhealthy keto, or you can do healthy. And so the issue here is not that people are given a set of rules that they have to adhere to. It's that we actually go in and work on their psychology and change their psychology so that they change their behavior. And we have a lot of experience with that. I mean, that's ultimately what sets us apart from just about any other diet program in the world, is that, we of course give some certain nutritional guidelines that we believe are based in good science. But more than that, what we're working on doing is changing people's wants. We're working on them collapsing their childhood anchors and creating a real sense of food freedom. Many people think food freedom is eating what you want when you want as much as you want, but that's not freedom. That's a path to guilt, resentment, and of course, health degradation. Real freedom is being able to eat what you want when you want as much as you want, not feeling guilty about it, but also being able to not eat what you wish you wouldn't eat when you didn't want to eat it. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we have to do for people, is we got to get them to a place where they don't have to use willpower to stay healthy, because willpower will never work. Willpower is a short-term muscle. You can hold your breath, but eventually your body is going to give in. And by the way, think about that. If you go underwater and hold your breath, you could be 20 feet under the water, but after about 2 minutes, your body is going to try to breathe, even though it's water. And that's what's happening for most people when they go on a diet. They hold their breath, and after a point in time, the body goes, nope, you've been calorie restricting me. You've been doing this. You've been doing that. I'm going to breathe now.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much once again for taking the time and for answering the questions. You brought a lot of great insight, and I'm definitely going to look more into the brain scans you talked about the active versus inactive people and the whole lymphatic system.
Yeah, you want to check out Daniel Amen. He does incredible work around brain scans and that kind of stuff. Check out Daniel Amen. And listen, Megan, I'll tell you why I do this. I get a lot of requests for interviews, and I don't do them all. But every now and again, and it's kind of like this for me. Every now and again, I see somebody who's on a path of passion and excitement. And when they're young like you are, I realize that if I give you anything, in a little inspiration, a little information, a little whatever, the effect that I think you can have in the world is huge, because you've got all these years ahead of you. And so you really inspired me with your passion and your knowledge and maturity and wanting to go. So I want to say two things to you. One is keep it up. But the second one is this: have fun too. Like make sure that it's all fun. And that's because it has been for me the whole time. Just, you got to get it. Like, it's all good to get deep in on this stuff, but you gotta enjoy it all too.
That's true. Enjoy life along the way. Got it, for sure. Well, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure, and enjoy your day.
I sure will. Thanks very much. Keep connected on Instagram. Let me know how things are going for you.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.